Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our weekly Technologies of the Future live webinar with Q&A. We are, I believe, going live on LinkedIn today. It looks like our stream is working, so thank you for all of the people who last Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our weekly Technologies of Close that so I can't double hear myself and get straight into it this morning, because we are going to talk about the convergence of digital twins and legacy. And I actually have two small passages from two different books this morning to be able to create a really great conversation around the convergence of these two topics. And the first one is from The Big Picture of Digital Twins. And the second one is from Being a Good Ancestor. Let me kick off. Like a raging wildfire, the concept of digital twins is now engulfing the individual space. Originated as an industrial concept, digital twin applications are extending into understanding the biological species, healthcare to sports, education to environment, marketing to social interactions. New ideas of digital twins for individuals are popping up every day. How could a digital twin impact your life? What are the use cases around the corner? Why should you care about them? Let's explore. Our digital lives. The past 20 odd years brought an unprecedented change in human history. The convergence of social, mobile, and cloud technologies transformed us into digital natives. It's no longer a question of physical versus digital, rather online versus offline. Digital engulfed our lives, and we happily immersed ourselves in the digital world. Devices extend individuals. Today, my Facebook talks to your Facebook to plan for a virtual meetup. The teacher is also hosted in some obscure corner of the world. And digitally grown trees boost concentration. And best friend is an algorithm providing unconditional love. Based on the trails we've left in the digital world, it's now possible to build a digital persona of an individual, but also a thing. So let me now go to Being a Good Ancestor and ask you this. Leaving a transcendent legacy for future people is a similar form of non-reciprocal gift exchange, but one that is passed through time rather than around space. Such exchanges already take place in everyday life, such as when parents pass used children's clothes onto other families. My children often wear jackets and shoes that have been handed down from older kids in the neighborhood, and will soon pass them on to the next cohort once they've outgrown them. More broadly, we're all recipients of gifts from previous generations, from the laborers of the past who built the roads and the sewers we use every day, the medical researchers who found cures for smallpox and rabies, the campaigners who fought against slavery for us, and the voting rights we take for granted, the composers who wrote music that bring tears to our eyes. As the 19th century anarchist geographer Peter Cropton wrote, for thousands of millions of years, men have labored to clear the forests, to drain the marshes, and to open up highways by land and water. At the crossings of the highways, great cities have sprung up, and within their borders, all the treasures of industry, science, and art have been accumulated. Whole generations that lived and died in misery, oppressed and ill-treated by their masters and worn out by toil, have handed on this immense inheritance to our century. Although we may often fail to acknowledge this inheritance, our lives are built on the gifts we've received from those ancestors we all share. Transcendent legacy is how we pay our dues. But instead of paying it back, can we pay it forward by becoming givers of gifts to future generations? And with that, I will invite online our experts this morning to have a conversation about the future of digital twins and legacy. Good morning, Christina. Good morning, Tim. Good morning, Brenton. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. How are you?
Hello.
Hello.
Fabulous. And I'm going to use that as my one-word opener. And I will pass on to Tim, your one word for this morning.
Ginormous. Actually, ginormal.
Nice. Brendan?
Oh, I've got nothing as clever as that. Serendipitous.
Christina?
Fateful.
Wonderful. And so I got a little bit excited as I was thinking about this topic, because digital twins, I guess it's not that easy at the moment to have enough information digitally to create a digital twin of a human or a thing. And Tim, I know we were talking about the nuclear facility at Lucas Heights, and I was thinking about the actual digital twin of that, and I was thinking about my aura scores, and I'm like, people and planet and things, and there's all these different types of digital twins. What is the legacy that we're all individually leaving? And I've got a lot of questions this morning, and so that's my formal welcome and hello, and I'm glad you've all joined for this conversation. Christina, I can see you've already got some thoughts. What are your thoughts on the mindset of digital twins and legacy?
I actually think we have a lot of information, and as you say, I'm not sure that there's enough to create the complete digital twin of an individual, depending on how much interaction they have in the ether. But it's interesting that we're having this conversation, and in the last couple of days, the news has come out about the gaming apps for children. And all the information that they're collecting on children, and how they can build a huge profile from under the age of 5 into adulthood, and who knows what that is. And I think it's quite interesting. So if I go into a major shopping centre department store, and I've got their app on my phone, I get a message, or I get an app, or like the app comes up at the top of my search. If I happen to go into my wallet or anything like that, it comes up at the top of the bar. So there's quite a lot of things happening that we're not sure of. I think digital twinning for me has its absolute place in the innovation space and as a prototype. So from person to software or to a hard product or service, I think it's just its potential is going to rise. And again, it's up to us humans how we're going to use it, whether we're going to use it for good or whether we're going to use it to manipulate people.
And there's many different views on it. And I guess that's where we're at in this current space and time. And I loved actually in the book, The Great Ancestor, or Being a Good Ancestor, was about short-term and long-term thinking. And, some of these things that we're starting to see pop up into our everyday lives is unique now. What will it be like in the future? And I think the mindset around that. Brendan, any thoughts?
Well, they started experimenting with some of this stuff where there's, I can't remember the exact details, but this mum, her child died. And so they digital twinned the child so that she could actually have the closure to say goodbye to the child. And so they constructed from video clips and all this stuff, the life of the child. And then the person was able to actually meet with the child and then, say goodbye and things like that. So it was really, really beautiful. And it was really good for the mum to actually get some closure. So that really helped her. I can't remember the name of it. There's maybe on YouTube, there's a thing about this. But also digital twins, they're used in fiction a lot, especially some of the old oracle type things where people go down to a planet and they find out there's a digital twin of the people that used to live there before. And so they've got all the knowledge, right? And you can see the same sort of thing happening now, right? So as someone dies, they are able to actually absorb all the knowledge there, and then you can actually then go and ask those people questions. I know some people got full uncomfortable talking to the dead like that, but it could be done, right? You could actually talk to these people, and there would be an AI generation of that person absorbing, what it meant to be them person, and they could be like sort of like an expert system in terms of in that sort of field, or as you can imagine, someone might want to have a little bit more interaction on an emotional level.
It reminds me of the pharaohs, actually, what you just said. They're going into the pharaoh tombs and seeing in hieroglyphics, which is what a digital twin really is. It's a capture of moments, and all the hieroglyphics and the paintings that form almost the digital picture or the twin picture of a human life. Same idea, different format.
Tim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I've been fascinated by digital twins ever since, I think it was, I was watching the TV show Suits. And Donna, who was the amazing secretary, created a digital twin of herself, which is called the Donna, that basically did her job when she needed to be there, and she was trying to commercialize that. And I think even extending into your favorite one, Lisa, which is Jarvis from Iron Man, which is really just a digital twin of Tony Stark himself. And then it comes to how we use this technology for good or for evil. So I think one of the really interesting applications is when we use this for training environments. So you might have someone doing a complicated task such as surgery, digital twins coupled with AI. Certainly, you get the real experience in an actual environment that without having the consequences of making a mistake. I think that's the killer app at the moment for digital twins, as well as for things like production lines. You can train production operators without having to have downtime on your production line. And these are the early stages of digital twins. But I think one of the risks of the longevity and what we leave behind from digital twins is that real twins in real life, they're trained by their environment, and their environment skews what they believe, their behaviors and other things. So you can get two people who are biologically the same but are very, very different people because of the way they've grown up. And it's the same with digital twins. The longer that digital twin is exposed beyond the life of a person, say it's a digital twin of a person, the legacy from that digital twin will change over time depending on the people it interacts with. And so the lasting legacy might not actually be reflective of the person in 100 or 200 years' time. It's sort of fascinating, but we don't think of the consequences of the change that technology comes and the fact that information in is information out. Garbage in is garbage out, and what you feed something obviously manifests and changes over time.
And Tim, I wonder on a different line. So let's have a look at data as opposed to AI and machine learning. And so if we think back over time and history, we've got certain amounts of data, and whether that be ancient paintings, or whether that be data that we've collected around different objects and that we know something's physically happened in time. And, stories are open to interpretation, but actually real data, and I'm thinking CCTV cameras and footage that has actually created a history of an organization or a place. And so factual data that potentially in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, 100 years, we could create a digital twin based on the data collected over time. So not based on today's technology, but based on future technology, where we can recreate scenes and recreate the actual digital twin of a history or a legacy of something. And I think that's where I was thinking about the nuclear facility at Lucas Heights and just all of the different research projects that happen there. And so in 100 years' time, and looking back of the history of that facility, the actual digital twin of potentially using CCTV cameras and being able to do a virtual reality tour of the facility and the history of what it was able to achieve over time could be really fascinating. And so I think when we're actually talking about these kinds of things, the time frame that we're talking around digital twins is impressive and important to be able to put that angle on it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's one of those ones where in a controlled environment, such as a nuclear reactor, you're never going to be able to have a digital twin sort of experience, virtual reality experience that is completely real because of the nature of the technology. But certainly Insto has an app which you can go onto all your app stores, and you can actually do a tour inside the reactor and become a neutron and meet Dave, the
I did that. It's really good.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
But I think where the advantage comes, we might not know things about, we're collecting reams and reams of data, terabytes of data a day from things like neutron scattering instruments. And what our understanding of physics is now and what's accepted may change in the future. We might know more. And having that data available to interpret with a new lens in the future, I think is highly valuable. It might unlock things, just like we apply modern medicine understanding to the mummies of the pharaohs that we exhumed from pyramids and things. We understand more about them now because we understand disease morphology and things that represent themselves. But we wouldn't have known that back then. The things like cause of death if they had genetic diseases, and the same thing goes with with physics and high-end or bleeding-edge technology and discovery science now. So I think it's going to be highly valuable into the future, and having that complete map of all the data that's collected from everywhere is, it's science for good, which is why it's created in the first place.
I actually wonder if at that point where we're collecting it, so we're collecting it in the past or from the past and bringing it in, are we creating a digital twin? I think it will be really interesting to discuss into the future and see what we come up with, what the definition of a digital twin is. I know when I was in Boston at the Innovation Conference doing a keynote there, I stayed in the apartment of somebody who was very much involved in the capturing of the second bomber. And the information that I received was that at some point, every photo, every piece of video was uploaded, and this continuous scene created, and that's how they eventually caught who the second bomber was. So I wonder, what are we forming a digital twin of when we're going back into the past, uploading data, different perceptions of where the content comes from and what it means? I think there's a whole lot of ethical discussion around this topic, but also around the definition of what is a digital twin.
And then just to complicate that even further, what is a legacy? And how do you define that based on, a person or an object or, the environment as well? What sort of legacy are we all leaving, and what are we creating that's leaving a legacy as well? And, definitely advanced manufacturing, or even in normal manufacturing, of sort of looking at just material science and the legacy of what we create as well. And so I just wonder how data and how that all plays out, and what the future is going to look like when we can actually look back. And talking about those stories, Christina, I think it was someone from the FBI was actually sharing about 10 years ago, I saw a talk, and he was saying how that, if you went for a job with the FBI, they'd actually run visual recognition on your face and just replay any time that your face had hit the internet in a CCTV camera or anything like that, to be able to see what type of person you were. And I think with that knowledge, that pay it forward legacy that the book was mentioning, is that we actually have the opportunity now that we know these technologies exist. So how do we want to show up every day, and what do we want to create every day? And just to double down on that, I think our roles really make a difference in that. We're part of a multinational CEO group, and we're at their 10-year anniversary of this networking group last night. And some of those CEOs are running huge budgets and huge amounts of staff and, big operations here in Australia. And so they're actually leading a lot of change, and they have a lot of opportunity to lead change within their organizations. And so I think that's probably just more of a rant and a lot of questions than anything else. But, where are we at now, and what actions do you think that as individuals that you'd like to take and see in your own personal legacy? And what would you encourage other people to think about?
I'd encourage people to go look at a website on YouTube called 2 Minute Papers, which it talks about all these research papers coming out. And one of the things they do study is digital twins and simulations and how they match real objects and how close they are, which is really, really scary in some ways. And the fact is how close to reality these things are. And the algorithms used to be really expensive, as in they take really, really long time to calculate, and they weren't very accurate. Now they're extremely accurate, and they're also taking almost real time. Okay, so that's really, really good. So now you can do that. Now you can predict forward, right? So I suppose the only danger with digital twins and anything with machine learning and stuff like that is the data in and the natural biases it assumes. All right, so we have to be really, really understanding of those limitations. Biases don't mean the machine's evil or it's bad. It just means that we, as people who interpret the data that comes out of those things, have to be aware of what led to that situation, right? Like for instance, the robo-debt scheme, right? The robo-debt scheme affected, thousands of lives. It was 2,000 suicides out of that, because the machine learning that was supposed to be discovering all this stuff was flawed. People knew about it, but they didn't do anything about it, and therefore, people basically sent out notices of debt to people without actually realizing that these things weren't accurate. Okay, of course, everyone else, because it's a big system, everyone was relying on that data, right? They didn't question it, right? So this is one of those things where the politics aside and the evilness of the actual plan, the actual data itself was used in one way. It wasn't accurate, and people knew about that, or should have known about that. And that makes its way into all these other machine learning systems that we rely on, such as, looking for crime everywhere and things like that from CCTV footage. You don't get the context. You get a raw video. There's no context of what's around that. So there's always these gaps in this knowledge, and that will create these problems. So as long as we understand that, we can use these machines for the way that they're supposed to be, as a tool, as something to assist us in making a decision, not 100% relying on the results of that and not questioning it, because obviously they've got bugs and they're flawed.
I think you've made a perfect point, Tim, because what you just outlined was something that we're all very concerned about, particularly in the work we do around first order, second order consequences. So here's something that happened. Here was a first order consequence. Here was a second order consequence around a particular event, knowing that everything is a perception. And I find it a bit fascinating at the moment that we rely so heavily on the data and the algorithms and everything else when we know that they're human inputted. So it's actually the human behind every algorithm, every data set that goes in, which is coloured by the bias and coloured by perception. And we're all the sum of, all of our experiences, our socioeconomic, political, etc. backgrounds. So what does that mean when we're feeding in? We're just at the tip of the iceberg dealing with the ethics around bias. And particularly, I think we really need to be so focused on what are the first order and second order consequences of everything that we do? What are the ongoing events that can lead from a decision that's made, as you just pointed out? The algorithm, it started off a chain of events that ended up in suicides. So we really need to be very mindful and consider what's ongoing in everything that we do, particularly with using things like digital twinning and data, etc. at the moment.
Yeah, I agree, Christina. I think confirmation bias is a huge problem because we are looking for data and things to back up what we fundamentally believe, which may not be right. And I see this all the time where people construct arguments, specifically conspiracy theorists. They construct arguments of minority papers or minority information on the internet, but then that becomes fact in their mind, and then everything they make a decision on is based upon a false assumption. And when you think of that from a legacy perspective, if the future of civilization is going to make decisions on data and knowledge that's been created on false assumptions, that has far-reaching consequences. You look at legacy decisions and legacy technologies impact the world we live in now. There's parts of, say, the space shuttle or satellites that are designed because a part in a supply chain need to fit under a bridge somewhere in England or the UK, and the width of that bridge is, all cars in general, the width of a lane of the car is designed from the horse and carriage to two horse width, and the wheels have to be so far apart to accommodate the horses. And that stems back to Romans. So, we have technology from 2000 plus years ago and decisions that were made around the size of things influencing technology well into the future. And when we start to wrap this around decisions that are made from AI-led data now, what are the consequences in 1,000 or 1,000,000 years' time on things that we make, decisions we made now from confirmation bias? I think it's kind of interesting but terrifying when you think of it this way.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we're getting a little bit short on time, and I'm just thinking of the scientific data that we're capturing as well. And, I know, and in the Nuclear Heights facility, Tim, there was the ice that was captured over time from Antarctica, and just the story that paints and whatnot. And I think the raw data that we're actually collecting and the legacy of the raw data and the assumptions that we can actually put on top of that in the future could be interesting too. So, it's definitely an interesting time to be alive. And so with that, I will actually ask you all for a vision of the future. And so maybe instead of 20 years into the future, just waking up, let's say it's 100 years into the future this morning, and you've just woken up. What does a legacy look like and digital twins based on our conversation this morning? Brendan, you're always ready.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking without being dystopia, that we basically assuming that we've actually solved the issues of climate change, that we actually wake up, we go out to our windows and just look out and we see beautiful trees and things like that, because we've actually learned from the lessons of the past. But also then we can interact with these digital twins of people who have passed, friends, family, etc. Yeah, be able to have a conversation with them. I think that would be, maybe some scary, but I think it'd be interesting to actually be able to have that conversation with people who may have died, and maybe we can use that to get the knowledge out of scientists and things like that. Yeah, as a little bit more personal than going to a machine.
I'm imagining asking Einstein about quantum mechanics. That's another conversation for another day. Tim.
Yeah, so in 100 years' time, my physical being will no longer be here. It'll be long decomposed. and I will wake up in my mech, and my operating system will reboot and upload, and I'll walk into my kitchen, and because my mechs will make new materials that are acid rain resistant and things, because the planet hopefully won't be this, but we'll have suffered some of the consequences of the damage that humanity has done to it. So I have to oil up my joints and charge my batteries up, or feed my my little fusion source that powering me, and then I'll go about my day as a AI driven mech rather than as we do now, which is a grey matter driven piece of blood and bone, really.
Cyborg.
Yeah.
Tim, I'm going completely opposite to that. I'm going to say that in 100 years' time, Einstein's theory around quantum physics has well and truly been proven, and we realise that this body is just the case in which all our energies live. So we no longer need the case, and we are this mist, if you like, of ongoing energy, and we have combined our knowledge into a utopic society. Brendan, I'm going utopia, and we actually have a collective consciousness where we are looking after planet, people. There's no need for profit. The profit is not what we imagine it to be now. The profit is in the legacy and in the goodness of the lives that we lead. So I am totally in utopia in 100 years' time. I hope it only takes like 10 to get there. But yeah, all our needs are met.
Okay, so in 100 years' time, I'm 139 and I'm a believer in longevity, escape velocity. So I'm still alive and actually feeling fitter and younger and healthier than I have, because we've been able to crack the reverse aging and be able to be at our peak biology and state every day, as long as I'm adding value. And I think this is part of that legacy. And I love one of the ACTI values. I'm part of a group called ACTI, and it's leaving every person and place that you touch better than when you found it. And I think with information is power, and a lot of what we're talking about in digital twins will give us a lot of information. And so to be able to utilize and synthesize that information, to be able to take positive action and do the right thing is going to be very exciting. And so I hope for any of our listeners out here who have joined us this morning will still be with me in 100 years' time, and we'll be having more conversations, whether they be physical or digital. Tim, love to dial you in from your cyborg state that you're in, but also would love to have you still alive then as well. So maybe we'll talk about longevity in the coming few Fridays. With that, I'll wrap us up. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Tim, for joining us. And thank you for always thinking about the convergence of different topics to be able to have these great conversations. Thank you for everyone who's joined us live online on LinkedIn, streaming today for the first time. Thank you, Hayley, so much for bearing with me as we made this change, and for everything that you do. Have a wonderful Friday, everybody.
Have a good day, everyone.